In this segment, we're coming to you from Buffalo, New York. September of 1901, an event happened right about here, Fordham Drive in Buffalo, that changed American history. 25th President of the United States, William McKinley, was assassinated by a man named Leon Czolgosz, a wannabe anarchist. We'll take a look at the McKinley assassination, who Leon Czolgosz was, why he did it, and what happened after the assassination in this segment. William McKinley was born in Ohio in 1843. After serving in the Civil War, he started a law practice in his native state. A member of the recently formed Republican Party, McKinley was elected Prosecutor of Stark County in 1869. William McKinley was elected to Congress in 1876, where he was served from 1877 to 1891. In 1891, McKinley won the gubernatorial election in Ohio. He was served as Ohio governor for 2 terms, from 1892 to 1896, before winning the presidency over William Jennings Bryan in 1896. McKinley assumed the presidency as the United States was emerging as a global power, both economically and militarily. McKinley's Assistant Secretary of the Navy during his first term was Theodore Roosevelt, a New York City native, military hawk, and dedicated advocate for a strong presence on the high seas. The event which defined the McKinley presidency occurred in 1898, when the United States went to war with Spain. The Spanish-American War was triggered by several factors, including the mistreatment of Americans in Cuba at the hands of the ruling Spanish government, and the desire on the part of U.S. business interests to capitalize on Cuban resources. The most notable event was the sinking of the battleship Maine in Havana Harbor that year. President McKinley had sent the Maine to Cuba to protect American interests there, and the ship exploded and sank in Havana Harbor. Although there was ample evidence suggesting that the explosion was an accident, President McKinley and Congress declared war on Spain, egged on in part by yellow journalists like William Randolph Hearst and Assistant Naval Secretary Theodore Roosevelt. The United States quickly dispatched the Spanish, winning an unqualified victory in just 10 weeks. As a result of the war, the United States acquired 3 new territories: Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. It also gained a stronger foothold in Cuba. The United States was now a world power. William McKinley was elected to a second term in 1900, and this time his running mate and vice president was Theodore Roosevelt. McKinley, a popular president, and the United States were riding high. But not everyone was pleased with America's rise to power. Anarchism, the belief that there should be no strong central government, had taken hold in Europe and in some areas of the United States. Although most anarchists were peaceful, some advocated propaganda by deed, using violence to convey their message. Anarchists were responsible for several attacks on European royalty, most notably the 1900 assassination of King Umberto I of Italy at the hands of Gaetano Bresci, an Italian immigrant who had been living in New Jersey and returned to his native land to kill the king. That assassination especially resonated with a sad, lonely little man in the American Midwest, Leon Czolgosz, the man who would kill President McKinley in Buffalo, New York in 1901. In this episode, we visit the site of the assassination of President McKinley. We also visit the Buffalo History Museum to speak with Brandon Kennedy, an authority on Buffalo history and the McKinley assassination, and to get a look at some of the implements associated with the assassination. Here with Brandon Kennedy. And Brandon, give us your title, what you do here. It is the Buffalo History Museum. So tell us about yourself and what you do.
Hi, I'm Brandon Kennedy. I am currently the Programs and Events Coordinator at the Buffalo History Museum, and I've been the museum educator for the last year and a half.
All right, now we're here to talk about the assassination of William McKinley, which occurred in September of 1901 here in Buffalo. So we'll start off by asking Brandon, first of all, now why was President McKinley here? For what occasion?
Now, William McKinley, he was visiting Buffalo in 1901 to visit the Pan American Exposition. This was a World's Fair. Millions of people from around the world were visiting this. And this was the first time these people could see things like electricity on a mass scale. Now, William McKinley, he was originally intending to be here for the opening of the fair on May 20th. However, when his wife got sick, he decided to reschedule, and then he would come back to Buffalo in 1901 in September 5th and 6th of that year.
His wife had a lot of health problems throughout her life.
Yes.
And we don't do World's Fairs anymore. I can remember the last World's Fair that I remember was when I went to, was in 1982 in Knoxville, Tennessee. But there's not as much need for World's Fairs anymore because the kind of stuff that's on display at a World's Fair you can get from books on the internet and so forth. So, but it was a bigger deal back then. And so it was a big deal for the United States to host the World's Fair.
Yes, exactly. This was a time in American history where America had just entered the world stage for the first time after the Spanish-American War. Part of this fair was celebrating a lot of the progress America had made overseas, domestically, and celebrating the industrial prowess of this country and the sort of upswing in economics throughout the 19th century.
And not everyone was pleased with that progress, and that's what we'll take a look at in the next clip. So what happened on September 6th, 1901 here in Buffalo, we're talking about now?
So September 6th was really a day in American history that changed the next century. This is something that brought Theodore Roosevelt into the presidency and all the things that came along with his administration. Now, on September 6th, William McKinley, he's here in Buffalo. He's visiting the Pan American Exposition. And the day before, he had given a speech outside of the Temple of Music, celebrating this century of progress. Now that it was the 6th, he had sort of toured the fairgrounds, and now he was back at that same Temple of Music where he was hosting a reception. This is a reception that anybody could walk up to the president, shake his hand, introduce themselves. McKinley was very proud of the fact that he could shake up to 50 hands in a minute. Now, this is a little, this reception, this is something that even McKinley's secretary, Cortell Yu, tried to sort of work out of the schedule several times. However, McKinley overrode this decision. He wanted to be seen as this very public figure that's out there shaking hands with supporters and meeting with the folks that put him in office.
We still, despite the fact that in 1901 we had who had had two presidents assassinated, Abraham Lincoln in 65 and James Garfield in 1881, Americans still would latch onto the idea that American presidents, U.S. presidents, needed protection. They thought it was something that would make a president look weak. It was something that would make a president look detached from the crowd. And it was something that people thought, oh, that goes on in Europe with European monarchies and dictatorships. It doesn't go on here. And McKinley said to the secretary you mentioned a while ago, oh, no one's going to want to kill a president as popular as I am. And he was very popular. It only took one person. And who was that one person?
That one person was Leon Czolgosz. In the lead up to the assassination, he was going under an alias, Fred Neiman, which sort of translates to Fred Nobody or Fred No Man. Now, Leon Czolgosz, his inspirations lie within a few different wheelhouses, so to speak. Leon Czolgosz, he was originally from the Detroit area, but he moved to Ohio, and here he got involved with factory work. While he was working in factories in Ohio, he participated in some labor strikes. He ends up getting blacklisted, and he sees the man in power of Ohio, McKinley, who's governor at that time, and he sort of blames him in some ways for a lot of his own personal troubles, a lot of the strife that he's seeing in his life, and he's also somewhat inspired by this anarchist philosophy that's been circulating within these labor movements. Little interesting side story to the whole anarchist thing. Leon Czolgosz, while he's going around as Fred Neiman, even within these anarchist circles, they're a little bit weary of him. Yeah. They almost start warning other chapters or other members of this Fred Neiman. They don't know if he's a government spy.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I like to put it this way, is that in every era of society, there are people who don't fit in with the mainstream, whether they're right wing, left wing, what have you. They just don't fit in for some reason. Mm-hmm. But at least they fit in with each other. Leon Shawgoss was a guy who couldn't fit in with the people that couldn't fit in.
Right.
What do
Yeah.
you do with people like that? Those are the people that are truly dangerous. To me, and I know we'll get off the subject here, but it harkens forward to about 60 years when another presidential assassin that couldn't fit in with communists, because the thing you're talking about here was they were leery of this guy because he was socially awkward, for one thing, you think. And plus, he seemed too eager, right?
Right. He was always trying to agitate them into action, trying to get them carrying out violent attacks on public officials, or just sort of turning what was a peaceful strike into something more violent.
All right, so back to September of 1901.
Yes.
So President McKinley is hosting this reception line here. Leon Shawgoss is in the reception line.
Yes.
He has a bandage on his right hand. Okay. Presidential protection was very, very weak in those days. But if a Secret Service agent who was standing behind President McKinley had been standing beside him instead of behind him, he may have noticed that Shawgoss had this bandaged hand. All right, so Shawgoss comes up with a bandaged hand. What happens next?
So yes, before he's in line, Leon Czolgosz, he takes this 32 caliber revolver that he's bought at a local
Which
gun
is right
shop.
here. You can't see it very well, but it's right here.
And this is a 5-cylinder gun. He's taken it, he's wrapped it in a handkerchief to sort of feign an injury, make it look like his right hand is injured. And he's patiently waiting for his opportunity to meet the president. When he finally gets to the point where he's in front of McKinley, McKinley sees that his right hand is bandaged and instead goes to shake his left hand. And at this point, the assassin Leon Czolgosz, he extends the gun. He shoots 2 bullets out of it. The first one, oddly enough, ricochets off of McKinley's coat on a button. And the second one lodges itself within its abdomen. Almost immediately, both McKinley and the assassin are taken away from the scene of the shooting. Leon Czolgosz, a number of people in the crowds sort of pounce on him, and they hold him until the police can sort of subdue him.
Beat him, bloodied and bandaged.
Yeah.
And there's a famous photograph of that too, him behind bars. All right, so McKinley is taken, he receives medical treatment. Vice President Theodore Roosevelt is on vacation, and the initial reports are that McKinley is going to be okay. And what it would be unimaginable nowadays, Roosevelt gets word that McKinley's going to be okay and doesn't even bother to call off his vacation until the news turns bad.
Yes.
Something like that.
It's an interesting sort of story, Roosevelt's time. He's sort of in and out of Buffalo throughout this week following the shooting. Going into September 7th, that's the day he'll first arrive. He'll stay here for 2 days or so. There's a surgery performed on the president. While hopes are high, the cabinet encouraged Roosevelt to continue on with his scheduled trip to the Adirondacks. He's not going to turn the opportunity to get lost in nature for a few days, so he takes him up on this offer. And it's when he's out there in the Adirondacks, when he finally gets the news that McKinley is passing away. And this is about 8 days after the shooting on September 14th. It's September 13th that he receives telegrams from the cabinet that he's needed back in Buffalo as soon as possible. And it's there where he'll take a midnight ride, so to speak. He'll hop on his horse, race it to the bottom of the mountain. He was on Mount Marcy when he finds out about the upcoming...
The assassination.
Yes.
The impending death, yeah.
The impending death. At this point, the assassination was about a week ago.
And so Roosevelt takes the oath of office here in Buffalo.
Yes, Roosevelt, he will arrive in Buffalo. He's been in and out of town. He's been staying at the house of a friend of his, Ansley Wilcox. These two men, they've known each other for about 15 years at this point in their lives. They've worked on a number of pieces of state legislation with one another, including working on turning Niagara Falls into a state park. And they both worked in pursuit of conservationism and pursuit of social reform. And when he arrives in Buffalo, Ansley Wilcox invites him to stay in his own home rather than staying in a hotel. Roosevelt accepts him on this offer, and he'll stay with the Wilcoxes on and off throughout this week. And it's on September 14th, after McKinley had passed away, just a few blocks up the road from Ansley Wilcox's home at John Milburn's home, where Theodore Roosevelt will take the oath of office in the library belonging to Ansley Wilcox, becoming the 26th president of the United States and also the youngest man to ever ascend to the presidency at just the age of 42.
Okay, in a moment we'll take a look at what happened to Leon Czolgosz after the assassination of President McKinley.
A sad footnote.
The first man to grab Leon Czolgosz was an African-American man named James Parker, a Georgia native and constable. He was hailed as a hero for his actions, but as a reflection of the sorry state of race relations in the U.S. at the time, Parker was not allowed to witness the trial of Leon Czolgosz, save for the testimony that he provided. Crime like this were to happen today. A layperson's guess here, both lay people. How long do you think it would take before this person actually went to trial and was convicted and sentence was imposed? How long would it take?
Nowadays, with all the appeals and everything, it could go on for years.
Now, how long did it take in the case of Leon Czolgosz?
With Leon Czolgosz, he was arrested, tried, convicted, and sentenced to death and executed, all within the matter of 6 or 7 weeks, about 42 days.
He was executed in Auburn.
Yes, the Auburn State Prison.
About 120 miles from here, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and he had no regrets.
No, he owned up to it in both the trial and his last words.
He was proud of it. And some of the anarchists that he tried to be so chummy with, he bragged about or exaggerated his ties to them. Mm-hmm. But then after he did this, now of course a lot of them were rounded up and arrested, but it turned out this guy partnered with nobody had anything to do with it. However, people like Abe Isaac in Chicago and Emma Goldman, the leading anarchist of our day, they praised Czolgosz for his actions. They said, we had nothing to do with this, but way to go. That's the way things work. Well, after the assassination of President McKinley, Americans were very angry, to say the least, at Leon Czolgosz and anarchists in general. Vice President Roosevelt vowed to declare war on anarchy. The problem was, it wasn't so much a war on people as it was a war on ideas. That's hard to fight, particularly when the First Amendment's involved. What is interesting is, 100 years later, eerily reminiscent, exactly 100 years later, September 11, 2001, we had the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The rhetoric that was used just after the 9/11 terrorist attacks was very reminiscent of the war on anarchy that Theodore Roosevelt had declared exactly 100 years ago. For over 100 years following the assassination of William McKinley, the event was largely forgotten, at least here in Buffalo. There are lots of exhibits concerning the McKinley assassination at the local history museum here, but it was only a few years ago when local Erie County residents decided to erect this memorial to the McKinley assassination to William McKinley. And that's why the rock here is called, by the locals, the Rock. On the other side is a little flower garden. And every September, some locals come out here and they adorn this site with American flags as memorial to President McKinley and what happened here. Don't forget to check out my book, A History of the United States Through High-Profile Assassinations, published by Cognella, which includes in-depth coverage of the McKinley assassination and many others. Also, check out episode 13 of Crime Chronicles podcast titled Presidents, Assassinations, and Attempts, which covers attempts against U.S. presidents from 1835 to 1881. Well, I hope you enjoyed this edition of Crime Chronicles. As we delve into the darker side of human nature, we invite you to join us on our journey by liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Your support helps make possible our inquiry into the sometimes unsettling but always fascinating phenomenon known as crime and justice. So hit that like and subscribe button right now and don't miss future episodes. Till then, Mark Jones, hoping you will join our Crime Chronicles community. And thanks for tuning in.